Between 2002 and 2011, BloodRayne only has 3 games within the entire series, with BloodRayne Betrayal being its latest insertion. Although the IP had exposure in comics and a trilogy of ill-conceived films in the 2000s, yet since Betrayal's release, the interest in producing new entries have been on the minds of game studios, including WayForward and original developer Terminal Reality. However, around June of last year, Ziggurat Interactive claimed the rights to BloodRayne, along with other IPs belonging to the previous publisher, Majesco Entertainment. In addition, Ziggurat collaborated with both studios in remastering all BloodRayne games for modern systems. Terminal Reality would handle the first 2 games, whereas WayForward would deal with its side-scrolling counterpart, calling it BloodRayne Betrayal Freshbite, and, as you've seen from the title of this video, is today's subject. Changes like the reworked difficulty and the inclusion of voice acting are selling points of this re-release, but it's been a decade since our half-breed cut down Creatures of the Night, so even with its amendments, is this game worth sinking our teeth in? You assume the role of Rain, a half-vampire human hybrid, or better known as a Damphia. Working with the Brimstone Society, an organisation protecting humanity from the supernatural, she's called in for one final assignment to infiltrate an underground castle infested with monsters led by a vampire lord. It turns out their leader is Rain's father, Kagan, aiming to purge humanity to extinction. With no one else capable of matching his power, she must stop him before he puts his plan in motion. Like its 2011 release, BloodRayne Betrayal Freshbite is a 2D hack-and-slash platformer, where Rain slays undead beasts and travels through dangerous stages. She has twin blades for melee combat and a pistol for distant targets, but has limited ammunition. Fortunately, enemies drop ammo for Rain to pick up, and they're abundant regardless of difficulty setting. Other skills like dash and provide extra mobility, paramount for getting out of dodge, and of course, due to her vampirism, she can suck blood from enemies to restore health. Using Rain's abilities is part of getting high scores, grading your performance depending on how many points you obtain. Clearing out enemy waves, finding treasures, and finishing levels quickly without taking damage affects the result upon completing a chapter. That said, you would assume the combat would be exciting, and at first, it was satisfying pulling off combos, only to kill them off with a decapitation. Unfortunately, BloodRayne Betrayal's Freshbite's shortcomings don't take long to materialise. Indeed, the game's biggest flaw is the controls, specifically how cumbersome Rain is. For a character with vampiric powers, you would assume our Damphia would be quick on her feet, but instead, Rain slides to a stop before changing direction, which is detrimental when split-second decisions are in order, and it doesn't help she can't cancel out her attack animations, meaning more often than not, you'll be taking unpreventable strikes. In addition, since you're fighting multiple adversaries who have melee and ranged attacks whilst other effects are going off, it's near impossible to keep track of everything, let alone maintain composure in the heat of battle. This problem even extends to bosses, with the final one in particular being vexatious beyond belief. By the way, Rain can't duck or block, something she should be able to do. Therefore, most engagements become reckless affairs, rather than using Rain's repertoire with finesse and confidence, and no matter what difficulty you're on, there's hardly any difference. In some instances, the game doesn't take itself seriously, like how Rain can deal damage by hopping on certain enemies until their death, and there's nothing they can do. It's so baffling there's even a trophy/achievement for this behaviour, so if the game doesn't care, why should we do the same? Consequently, the scoring system is trivial, and even if those listed issues didn't exist, the requirements for scoring high are too strict. The highest may be called Damphia, however getting Wormchow for the most part isn't too surprising. Worse still, the remaster doesn't have leaderboards, unlike the original, reinforcing how trifling this feature is. Beyond the violence, there's platforming Rain must navigate, and sadly it also suffers in this area. Because of her sluggish agility, performing precise jumps is precarious, as misjudged leaps at best lose you HP, and at worst result in a restart. Luckily there are checkpoints, yet it shouldn't be an excuse for suspect level design. Heck, there are sections where she's fleeing from a rolling saw blade, and I can't stress enough how thwarting they were. Getting height on ranged jumps is also strange, because she has to move away from her desired destination before you flick the left analog stick that way, whilst pressing the jump button simultaneously. Her backflips may look impressive at first, and admittedly, I did adapt to its inputs. Nevertheless, it's still puzzling given Rain can't double jump, which other games have and would have been just as effective here. There are also insect-like enemies she bounces on within certain levels, though jumping from one to another is dodgy. Once airborne, holding down the D-pad or the left analog stick whilst pressing the attack button is mandatory, so she gets enough altitude to repeat the process. It's like WayForward were trying to make these controls different for the sake of it, without considering the implications beforehand. As you advance through its 15 chapters, you can find ancient vampire skulls. Some are obvious whereas others are well hidden, but obtaining these enables Rayne to either extend her health gauge or increase how many bullets she carries. The problem is, given how easy it is for enemies to hit you, and ammo isn't hard to come by, there's no reason for not opting for the latter. Furthermore, these skulls would have been ideal for buying new skills, or weapons Rayne could use as the game goes on. Granted, she does get a laser type armament and the ability to transform into a raven, however the former is mainly for unlocking doors and light traversal, whereas the other is a late game ability, and its controls and levels are just as irritating. Besides, excluding health and ammo upgrades, Rayne doesn't retain these if you intend a second playthrough, like you would even bother anyhow, not least because there's not enough depth to justify its replayability. Anyway, your actions are in the context of the game's story, though it leaves much to be desired. BloodRayne Betrayal Fresh Bites features voice acting, which wasn't present in its 2011 counterpart, and although the performances are admirable, including Laura Bailey and Troy Baker reprising their roles as Rayne and Kagan respectively, the characters are too underwritten to leave a lasting impression. Because of this, any drama it sets up have no payoff. The comic book aesthetic first gets your attention, as its animations and backdrops are well made, but their appeal wanes when fighting the same enemies towards the game's end, and more so when it tries many times to be stylish at the expense of clarity, though on a positive note, it does maintain a stable frame rate. The score by Jake Kaufman is excellent, comprising metal guitar riffs with orchestral beats across all stages, and even going so far by having piano versions when Rayne is close to death. It's a shame the NES tracks from its OST aren't present in this remaster, something players could toggle in the game's options. Still, the music is one of the best parts about this title, amplifying what's on screen despite its many imperfections. BloodRayne Betrayal Fresh Bites may be a remaster with a few perks, but it can't get around its drawbacks that tarnished the original. Initially, the combat gets your blood pumping, no pun intended, however it soon recedes due to a lack of depth and cumbersome controls ruining the overall experience. Platforming is just as questionable and frustrating, and although the voice actors do their best, the characters and story are unmemorable. It isn't the worst game ever made, but it was a night to forget.